So as I mentioned earlier, Friday was the summer solstice. And that means that the June 21st was the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. The sun rose at about 6:28, and it officially set just before 9 o'clock at night. I think in Atlanta, we officially had 14 hours and 24 minutes of sunlight. I don't know about you, but I get up a little earlier these days than I once have, and so I've been up before the sun rises, but pretty shortly after I get up, it's just beginning to want to peak above the horizon. And then it's really hard to get to bed at night because the sun's out till like 9 o'clock, and it really doesn't get good and dark till 9:30 or 10. And I'm when the light is on, I am totally wired and have a hard time sleeping. I've had the opportunity to travel to Europe several times in my life, and in London this time of year, the sun comes up like ridiculously early in the morning, like 4 o'clock early in the morning. And so when I've been on trips, it was pretty helpful because we would stay up late at night and like 12:30 or 1 o'clock late and have early buses or trains that we were getting on. And so you'd have to get up early, and it helped that the sun was coming up so early. So summer solstice is interesting to be talking about in church because most everything associated with the solstice is very pagan in nature. Although throughout history, it's kind of had somewhat religious overtones. A couple of the world's major monuments are directly tied to the summer solstice. The first one in ancient Egypt, the Great Pyramids. If you stand at the Sphinx and look between two of the pyramids, that's exactly where the sun sets on the summer solstice. And then at Stonehenge, the way that those stones are aligned, the heel stone of one of them marks exactly where the sun sets on the summer solstice. So for thousands of years, human beings have marked that day as an important day. Now in the church, as has been the case with many holidays, the church also kind of adopted the summer solstice, and it's the church's affiliation is that it's recognized as the eve of St. John. And so John the Baptist, in the Bible we're told that John the Baptist was born about 6 months before Jesus. And so since in our calendar we believe Jesus was born somewhere around December 25th, then somewhere around the middle of June is when we celebrate the birth of John the Baptist. Now, the interesting thing about that as well is that the winter solstice, so the summer solstice occurs almost always on June 21st. This year was unique in that in the western part of the United States, technically the summer solstice occurred in the late evening on June 20th. But the opposite is true in the summer solstice being the longest amount of daylight through the year. The shortest day of the year generally occurs on December 21st or December 22nd. It can happen as early as December 20th or as late as December 23rd. And that is the longest night of the year. And generally Christian churches will observe that. And it's one of the nights that seems, the longest night is known to be one that is most difficult for people who are mourning loss or have had a difficult year or grieving something because they seem to be surrounded by darkness. One of the most fascinating things to me has always been that in the further north you go, the longer the days are. So places like Alaska and northern parts of Canada, they will have 24-hour tournaments of various kinds, whether it's baseball or play golf for 24 hours. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? How many double bogeys I can shoot in 24 hours, and it should be a lot. But if you go all the way to the Arctic Circle, the sun on the summer solstice never goes below the horizon. By contrast, at the Antarctic Circle on that same day of the year, the sun never rises above the horizon. Fascinating juxtaposition of those 2 days. The more I thought about it, the more I thought about the importance of light. And so there's several texts I want us to share today, and I want us to talk about that light and the significance of light in our lives and what it means for us. I want to start in John's Gospel. Y'all have heard me read this before. It's one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, the Gospel of John, beginning in the first chapter in the first verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John, and he came to witness, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but came to testify to the light, the true light, which enlightens everyone who has come into the world. We correspond that with very early in the Bible. If we go to the book of Genesis, in the very first chapter, the very first words in our Bible, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. And then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. Light is a part of the very creation of who we are. It was the very first thing that God did in creation, was to bring forth light. Light is the essence of life, as we hear in John's gospel, as John is writing about Jesus, and that Jesus was with God when God created the light to begin with, and now Jesus is God's light that comes into the world. So light is at the very core of who we are. Light is essential for life. We have to have the sun's light to create photosynthesis that creates green plants, that produces oxygen that allows us to breathe and to live. Any of you have ever done shift work? Anybody in here ever worked the overnight shift? We've got some people who work the overnight shift. If you've ever worked the overnight shift, you know how essential light is to the human body. And even in environments in which people work the overnight shift, when they have as best as they can replicate natural light, that shift over time just wreaks havoc on the human body. Because the human body is out of its natural cycle, and it craves light to do work. We crave light to have energy. And when we're going against that natural rhythm of things, our body just absolutely thirsts and hungers and starves for light. I said light was energy. We also know that light is energy. Now again, those that know me know that I went to Georgia Tech and not near smart enough to understand what most of those engineers knew about light and energy and all of those various things that you learn. But I know this. I know that light produces energy, and the sun's light is one of the most powerful things in our universe. It truly allows for us to have life on earth. The interesting thing is that we find ourselves in the perfect balance. We're the perfect distance from the sun to allow the sun to provide that energy without that energy overwhelming us. I've followed with great interest the Mars rover. Have any of y'all followed that? It's fascinating what they're finding and what that incredible piece of technology is able to do as it digs into the Martian soil, as it tries to see whether or not once life could have been supported on that place. But light is critical to all of that. I'd never thought about it before. If you've ever done anything with internet service, you know that one of the newest form of delivering data is through optic cables. To have fiber optic cables that deliver that to you. And that's literally light beams. And one day, I was talking with some vendors, and they talked about dark cable. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And it's literally cable that doesn't yet have the light running through it, such that it's not yet producing or transmitting data. So there's this contrast between lightness and darkness. I tend to think on the longest days of the year we can get more done. I don't know about you, but in the winter months, when the days are shorter, when we reach toward that winter solstice, are the days when I have more difficulty getting things done. I don't want to get up in the morning and the sun starts setting before 6 o'clock at night, and I'm just ready to get in bed and hunker down. And so along with this light and this energy comes the opportunity to get more things done. Of course, artificial light, as I've already talked about, it allows for shift work. It allows for us to do things that we weren't able to do when the only way we had to produce light was maybe a torch or a fire. But in general, we still need that natural sunlight to get things done. In all my reading this week about the solstice, one of the most interesting things to me was, well, there's a couple different things. One is that it's the tilt of the axis of the earth that creates the summer solstice, when the sun is most directly in the northern hemisphere. The reality is the earth is actually at its furthest point from the sun, but it's the tilt of the earth that allows the sun's rays to get more closely to the earth's surface. The other thing that's interesting to me is that while June 21st is the longest day of the year, it is not the hottest day of the year. Those of us that were born and raised in Atlanta or anywhere in the South know that we get to June 21st and it's hot, but it ain't near as hot it's going to get in July and early August. We know that those 100-degree days that can come will come later next month and early in August. That's because what happens is, even though on June 21st the sun's rays are the closest to the earth, it takes a while for the earth and the water to heat up. And then it takes a little while longer for the earth and the water on the earth to begin to emit that heat back up through the earth. And so it actually takes a little while. There's a little bit of a delay from when the energy reaches the earth to when that energy is used by the earth. And we feel that energy, those of us that inhabit the earth. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus is talking about the light. Matthew 5, verse 14, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." So just as the sun, just as the earth absorbs the sun's light, we who are Christians, we who are followers of Christ, if Christ is the light of the world, we too are to absorb all that is good from Christ. And we are supposed to emit that energy to others. Jesus calls us to follow him. John's gospel tells us that Jesus was the light of the world, and then Jesus tells us that we are the light of the world. That we are the ones that are to carry that light into the world, carry that energy into the world to make a difference in the world. We are such a reflection of who we surround ourselves with. We have to look no further than our children, and when we see them saying things we say and doing things we do, we understand how powerful that energy is. We understand how they can become so much like us, particularly the more time they spend around us. One final verse I want to read for us from Ephesians chapter 3, verses 6 through 12. Chapter 5, verses 6 through 12. "Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be associated with them. For once you were in darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Live as children of the light. For the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and is right and is true. Try to find out what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what such people do secretly. But everything exposed to the light becomes visible. For everything that becomes visible is light. We use light to expose things that we can't see. And generally, people use darkness to hide things they don't want others to know about. There is great contrast between lightness and darkness. And so on Friday, we had the opportunity to expose ourselves to God's incredible light for the longest amount of time we will all year long. The way that we need to translate that is severalfold. One, as I mentioned, the earth gets this sun on June 21st because it is tilted toward the light. It's the same way with us. It's been said that you're either facing God or you're turned away from God. There's really no in between. Either we're following God or we're walking away from God. Now, solstice literally means the sun stands still. Because the sun would get to the peak of the horizon, or the peak of the sky, and just kind of literally stay there for several days in a row. God stands still before us, and we need to look toward and follow God so that we can be exposed to God's light and absorb that light and energy and go forth to share that light and that energy. And it's obvious the things that we need to do. It's literally preaching to the choir and the congregation this morning because you're already here, but one of the ways that we stay tilted toward God is to be in relationship and fellowship with other Christians. Part of that happens through worship. Part of it happens through service. Over the past 6 or 8 weeks, we've been engaged in a habitat build. Members from our church, along with other churches from around Atlanta, have gathered to build a home for a family. I would say that that is a wonderful way to absorb light and to give light. Through the various other partners, we do the very same things, whether it's with Safe House or Hospitality House or the Midtown Assistance Center. That is a way in which we can let our light shine. We can be children of the light. We can show others God's light. So through worship, through service, through fellowship. On Sunday morning, our classes that gather. On Wednesday, our Bible study that gathers. And other times throughout the week, our United Methodist women and those who met this week to pack boxes and send off socks, prayer shawls to troops in Afghanistan. See, those are all ways that people have absorbed the light and have reflected God's light and God's energy. I've said this before, and the bottom line of this for me is it's really all about energy. Light becoming energy and us focusing that energy in ways that makes a difference in the world. Now, dark days are to come, that's to be sure. Some days the sun is hidden by the clouds. Other days it's just the opposite of where we are now, in which there are very precious few moments that the sun actually shines. But we have to get fully into its presence, absorb all that we can, and be prepared to use that energy to make a difference in the world. We have to focus that energy in ways that are positive and encouraging. It's all really about energy and allowing the light's energy to shine in and through each and every one of us. You saw it a little bit this morning when the children gathered around the altar and we had our children leading us toward Vacation Bible School. The energy that is in the day school and that's in our children's ministry on Sunday mornings and when we've had special events is contagious. And I'm convinced it is directly from God. It's God's light shining in and through those families and in and through those children to make this a place that others want to come and call home. So this week we give thanks for the longest day of the year. We give thanks for light that allows the summer blossoms to bloom, for the heat that builds up and causes afternoon thunder showers that brings the rain and allows the whole process to begin again. We need to bask in God's light and God's energy, and we need to share it just the same. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.